It seems many people don't understand the British voting system, or the levels of manipulation that our extremely right-wing Conservative Party are willing to employ to get their own way. Here is a year-by-year breakdown of their activities over the last 7 years. In 2015, the Conservatives came into full power with an election result overshadowed by alleged illegal activity. In 2016, while their right to be in power and to engage their manifesto promises was still disputed, they held an in or out EU referendum, which didn't include the questions whether to leave the single market or the customs union. They did not propose any plan for how to facilitate a leave outcome. In 2017, the investigation into the illegal activity finally concluded, with all the blame being heaped on a single scapegoat MP. The Conservatives could get away with this travesty of justice because they had been allowed to operate as if they were in power for 2 years, despite the question mark over their right to office. In early 2017, a Supreme Court review judged that the outcome of the 2016 EU referendum did not constitute a democratic decision for the UK to leave the EU, and that an Act of Parliament was required to decide this. Shortly after the Supreme Court ruling, Parliament voted on whether to pass the European Union Notice of Withdrawal Bill. David Davis, the prematurely installed Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, addressed Parliament before the vote and told them that this vote was not a decision to leave the EU. He lied that the decision had already been made by the referendum, despite a Supreme Court ruling otherwise. No one voting in that session would have any legitimate reason to believe that the bill that they were voting on was an instruction to the Prime Minister to trigger Article 50 and remove the UK from the EU. The European Union Notice of Withdrawal Act 2017 was passed. It confirmed that the Prime Minister had the power, which was already hers, to trigger Article 50, but contained no instruction for her to do so. Once the Act was passed, Theresa May sent a letter, under her own volition and without any instruction from Parliament or the British public, notifying the EU Commission that the UK intended to withdraw from the EU. Later, in a judicial review, the High Court gave the opinion that the Prime Minister had acted with parliamentary mandate, as this was implied by the passing of the Act, asserting that Parliament does not create legislation for no reason. This opinion was clearly in error because we have documentary and recorded evidence that David Davis misled Parliament regarding the purpose of the bill. Parliament acted under misdirection, which should invalidate their vote. Unfortunately, the group leading the High Court challenge ran out of funds and could not pursue against this bogus ruling. Interestingly, the judge, despite this opinion, did actually rule that the decision to leave the EU was made by neither the people of the UK, nor by Parliament, but by the Prime Minister herself, when she signed the notification letter. So the decision to leave the EU was an actual act of dictatorship on the part of a British Prime Minister. Thousands of people complained to the Metropolitan Police that they had witnessed an act of misconduct in public office, perpetrated by David Davis and Theresa May, when they misled Parliament into making a decision that they were told that they would not be making. The Metropolitan Police refused to pursue these complaints because they considered them vexatious and intended to stop Brexit. This was very definitely a political decision by the police because the evidence for the offences was public domain. They prevented the pursuit of justice because of their own political beliefs. In June of 2017, the Conservatives held a very early election. The reason for this is unclear. Apparently they intended to gain more support for their vision of a hard Brexit. Their election manifesto, beginning to see a pattern here, included promises to take us out of the single market and customs union. They failed to get a majority, only retaining power by way of Theresa May, their then leader, lying to the Queen that she was able to form a government. They managed to arrange a majority by offering a financial incentive, from the public coffers, to the Northern Irish Democratic Unionist Party. They were not in power when this offer was made. As a non-elected political party, they presumed that they were allowed the privilege of government and essentially misappropriated taxpayers' money to bribe their way back into power. Again, this was possible because they had been in power, albeit probably illegally, beforehand. They then leaned heavily on their manifesto promises as a mandate to force through a hard Brexit, despite the fact that no majority had voted for that policy. In 2019, despite the triggering of Article 50, Parliament was at a standstill about how to proceed. This was portrayed in the populist press as MPs deliberately blocking democracy. On the contrary, discussion by elected representatives, informed by expert opinion, is the way that British representative parliamentary democracy is intended to work. The precedented solution for such a parliamentary deadlock, which was set by the 1975 EC referendum, is to hold a referendum. In fact, except for a vote for independence by a UK Union member state, an inextricably divided Parliament is the only precedented circumstance in which a referendum should be held. The 2016 referendum was not justified by parliamentary precedent, and arguably should never have been held. But the Conservatives and their crony press misled the nation into believing that the very necessary second referendum would be undemocratic and pressed for another general election instead. In December of 2019, running only on a platform of getting Brexit done, the Conservatives manipulated themselves a landslide victory. This election was again overshadowed with probable illegal activity on their part. There is evidence of them interfering in the postal vote, and they abused taxpayers' money by illegally using the government's own IT services in their campaign. But who was going to complain? They had been in power before the election and were used to abusing that power to their own ends for electoral purposes. They also had their tame media to cover up for their illegal activities. They gained a majority of seats but did not gain majority support for Brexit, only commanding about 43% of the vote. What of their election promises? They abandoned their promised and widely trumpeted as brilliant withdrawal agreement within days of signing it. So far, they have not got Brexit done, instead endlessly spinning out a pointless debate over the Northern Ireland Protocol. And their manifesto is full of promises designed to remove power from the hands of the people and the judiciary, destroy human rights and cement the Conservatives into power indefinitely. No democratic majority voted for the crimes our government are perpetrating against the British people. They have cunningly manipulated the British electorate into thinking that they did. Their ultra-rich, mostly foreign backers own over 80% of the media, and the political side of the BBC is fully controlled by their cronies. It is almost impossible to form an informed political opinion based on the reportage of our corrupted mainstream media. The United Kingdom is at a point of political crisis unprecedented for decades and, sadly, the majority of our electorate remain totally unaware, while the overprivileged products of Eton and other elitist public schools make legislative decisions designed to strip us of our legitimate rights and protections and impoverish us all for the sake of feeding the insatiable greed of themselves and their super-rich masters. The Tories rely on the British voter having the tiny memory span of a goldfish. We need to start developing the long, long memories of elephants. So these enemies of freedom and human rights can finally learn what happens when we get our heads together and give them what they deserve.